The barrel of the .38 snub nose didn't shake, not even a millimeter. It was held by a hand that had extinguished 12 lives between Brooklyn and Hell's Kitchen. A hand that belonged to a ghost named Vincent, the surgeon. Moretti. He wasn't there for a drink. He wasn't there for the jazz. He was there for the silhouette sitting calmly in the circular booth, nursing a glass of lukewarm scotch. $50,000. That was the price tag Meyer Lansky had placed on the head of Ellsworth. Bumpy Johnson. In 1948, that wasn't just a bounty. It was a retirement fund. It was enough to buy 3 brownstones on Stryver's Row or a one-way ticket to a life where you didn't have to look over your shoulder. The air in the lounge was thick, choking on stale cigarette smoke and the desperate perfume of women looking for a savior who wouldn't come tonight. Most men, staring down the black tunnel of a silencer, would beg. They would bargain. They would sweat through their best suits and promise things they couldn't deliver. But Bumpy Johnson didn't flinch. He didn't even put down his glass. He just watched the ice melt, counting the seconds in a rhythm only he could hear. The music had stopped. The bartender had vanished. The silence was heavier than the gun. Moretti tightened his finger on the trigger. The metal sear began to slip. This was the end of the Harlem Godfather. The end of the resistance against the syndicate, or so the hitman thought. Because he wasn't holding the gun. He was holding the trap, and he was about to realize that you don't hunt a chess grandmaster in his own living room without losing your queen. Ellsworth, Bumpy Johnson, was not merely a gangster. He was the structural engineer of Harlem's underworld. By late 1948, he had consolidated the scattered numbers bankers, the policy kings and queens, under a single, fortified umbrella. He walked 125th Street not as a predator, but as a landlord. He was the buffer zone. To the people of Harlem, he was Robin Hood with a switchblade. He paid rents, bought turkeys, and financed educations. To the Italian and Jewish mobs downtown, specifically the Genovese family and their financial wizard Meyer Lansky, Bumpy was a bottleneck, a very expensive, very stubborn bottleneck. The post-war era had brought a shift in the wind. The roaring 20s were a memory. The disorganized chaos of the Depression was gone. Organized crime was becoming corporate. The syndicate, led by Lucky Luciano and managed by Lansky and Frank Costello, was looking to streamline. They wanted the heroin trade. They wanted the numbers racket. And they wanted 100% of the profits, not the sliver Bumpy was willing to negotiate. Harlem was changing, too. The artistic fervor of the Renaissance was giving way to a grittier, harder reality. The streets were hungrier. The police were more aggressive, fueled by political pressure to clean up the city before the upcoming election cycles. Tensions were wire-tight. A single spark could ignite a race war that would burn from 110th Street to the Bronx. The stakes were absolute. If Bumpy fell, Harlem would lose its financial autonomy. The millions of dollars flowing through the policy banks would be siphoned directly into the pockets of downtown bosses, leaving the community dry. Bumpy knew he wasn't just fighting for his life. He was fighting for the economic sovereign territory of Black America. Meyer Lansky, the mob's accountant, was a man who detested violence because it was bad for the bottom line. But he detested losing money even more. He calculated the risk. He crunched the numbers. And the equation came back red. Bumpy Johnson had to be subtracted. The order went out on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday night, every hitter from the Lower East Side to Chicago knew the number $50,000. The instrument Lansky chose was not a blunt object. He didn't send a team of thugs with baseball bats. He sent Vincent Moretti. In the underworld, Moretti was a whisper. He didn't have a record because he didn't leave witnesses. He was known as the surgeon, not because of any medical training, but because he could excise a problem from an organization with surgical precision. No collateral damage, no mess. He was the man who had supposedly handled the problem in the garment district back in '45, where 3 union leaders disappeared during a lunch break, never to be seen again. Lansky's motivation was purely mathematical. The Harlem numbers game generated an estimated $50 million annually. Bumpy controlled the flow. Lansky had offered Bumpy a 60-40 split, favoring the Italians. Bumpy had laughed in the courier's face and sent him back with a message. The only thing 60-40 about this deal is the chance you'll make it back downtown alive. It was an insult the syndicate could not abide. Moretti was dangerous because he was patient. He wasn't a cowboy. He had spent 2 weeks studying Bumpy's routine. He knew Bumpy ate at 22 West, got his hair cut at the specific barbershop on 7th Avenue, and spent his Tuesday nights at the Lenox Lounge. Moretti had resources that the local Harlem toughs couldn't dream of. Police on the payroll to look the other way, safe houses in Jersey, and weapons that didn't jam. The threat was existential. Lansky had issued a final ultimatum through a telephone call to the drugstore Bumpy used as an office. Retire or expire. It was a binary choice. Lansky had the money, the political connections, and the firepower. He had the murder inks. Legacy behind him. Bumpy had his wits, his switchblade, and the loyalty of the streets. But loyalty has a price, and $50 into Lozenge was a price that tested even the strongest bonds. The wolf wasn't at the door. The wolf was already in the living room, pouring a drink. The setup was flawless in its simplicity. Lansky had arranged for a distraction. A staged brawl at Small's Paradise, 10 blocks away, drew the majority of the 28th Precinct's patrol cars. Simultaneously, a tip was phoned in about a stash house on 145th Street, pulling away Bumpy's primary enforcers who were scrambling to protect the inventory. Bumpy was exposed. Isolated. The Lenox Lounge was iconic for its Art Deco interior, the zebra room specifically, with its animal print walls and low, intimate lighting. It was a place for lovers and liars. Tonight, the air smelled of stale beer, expensive perfume, and the sharp, copper tang of impending violence. At 11:20 p.m., the jazz band, a quartet playing a slow, mournful rendition of Mood Indigo, was signaled to take a break. The clinking of glasses seemed deafening in the sudden quiet. Moretti entered at 11:24 p.m. He wore a gray fedora pulled low and a trench coat that hid the bulk of his weapon. He didn't walk to the bar. He walked straight to the back booth, the King's Corner, where Bumpy sat alone. There were 7 other patrons in the back room. 2 couples whispering in the shadows, an old drunk near the service door, and a waitress named Etta who had seen too much in her 20 years serving drinks to scream. She just froze, clutching a tray of empty highballs, her knuckles turning white. 11:28 p.m. Moretti sat down opposite Bumpy. He didn't pull the gun yet. "Mr. Johnson," Moretti said. His voice was like grinding gravel. Bumpy looked up from his scotch. "You're not from around here. Your shoes are too clean. I'm from the bank. I'm here to close the account." 11:30 p.m. The tension in the room tightened like a piano wire. The couples in the corner sensed the shift in atmospheric pressure and hurried out, leaving cash on the table. The old drunk sobered up instantly and slid out the back. It was just Bumpy, Moretti, and Etta the waitress, who was now backed against the zebra print wall praying silently, 11:31 p.m. Moretti reached into his coat. The movement was slow, deliberate. He placed the .38 on the table, covering it with a napkin, muzzle pointed directly at Bumpy's chest. "You have 2 minutes to say a prayer, Ellsworth. The rabbi sends his regards." Bumpy didn't blink. He didn't look at the gun. He looked at Moretti's eyes. 2 minutes is a long time, Vincent. Long enough to change your mind. My mind is made up. 50,000 says so. 50,000. Bumpy mused, swirling his drink. That's the number they told you. But did they tell you about the ledger? 11:32 p.m. The moment hung suspended. The silence was absolute. You could hear the neon sign buzzing outside on Lenox Avenue. Bust. Bust. Moretti's finger tightened. The napkin fluttered slightly from the force of his grip. "Time's up," Moretti whispered. The room held its breath. The gun was leveled. The distance was 3 feet. A miss was impossible. Then Bumpy leaned forward, invading the personal space of death itself. He looked past the gun, past the threat, deep into the hitman's confusion. He spoke 3 words. Softly, calmly. "Meyer sold you." Moretti hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. But in the world of professional killing, hesitation is a question mark. And Bumpy Johnson was the answer key. What Moretti didn't know, what Lansky didn't know, was that Bumpy Johnson played the game 3 moves ahead. Bumpy had anticipated this move since the first threat arrived. He knew he couldn't outgun the syndicate, so he had to outthink them. 4 days prior, on October 10th, Bumpy had intercepted a low-level bagman working for the Genovese family. He didn't kill the boy. He bought him. For $500 and a bus ticket to Ohio. The bagman gave Bumpy the drop schedule. But Bumpy didn't steal the money. He did something far more damaging. He forged a ledger. He created a perfect replica of Lansky's accounting book. In it, he detailed a series of fictitious payoffs allegedly made by Lansky to Moretti, paying him to assassinate Frank Costello, Lansky's own partner. It was a masterstroke of paranoia. Back in the zebra room, Bumpy didn't reach for a weapon. He reached into his inner jacket pocket. Moretti flinched, the hammer of the .38 rising. Slow. Moretti hissed. "Just paper," Bumpy said. He slid a folded envelope across the table. It slid over the wet ring left by his Scotch glass and stopped against the gun. "Open it," Bumpy commanded. His voice wasn't a request. It was an order. Moretti kept the gun trained, but used his left hand to flip open the envelope. Inside was a single photograph and a page from the forged ledger. The photograph showed Moretti's own brother, who lived in Jersey, shaking hands with a man Bumpy had hired to look like a federal agent. The ledger page highlighted a $25,000 payment to Moretti labeled, "Co Stelo Rumvol. Lansky isn't paying you 50 grand to kill me," Bumpy said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "He's paying you to be the patsy. As soon as you pull that trigger, the cops rush in. They find this ledger on you. They find the photo. You go down for killing me, and they use this to frame you for planning to clip Costello. Lansky cleans house. He gets rid of me, and he gets rid of the only guy dangerous enough to threaten him. You." It was a lie wrapped in the truth of Lansky's ruthless nature. It was plausible. It was terrifying. Moretti looked at the ledger. He looked at the photo. The sweat broke on his forehead. The logic of the frame-up was perfect. Lansky was cold enough to do this. Bumpy took a sip of his scotch. "You came for my kingdom," Bumpy said, delivering the final blow to Moretti's resolve. But kings don't lose to men who can't see 3 moves ahead. The cops are outside, Vincent, waiting for the shot. Not to arrest you, to kill you. Vincent, the surgeon. Moretti lowered the gun. The napkin fell to the floor. The color had drained from his face. The predator had become the prey. He shoved the gun back into his trench coat. How do I get out? Moretti asked. His voice was no longer gravel. It was ash. Back door, Bumpy said, pointing toward the kitchen. Tell the cook I said to give you a ham sandwich for the road. And Vincent, don't go home. Moretti vanished into the Harlem night. 10 minutes later, the police Bumpy had warned about never showed up. They didn't exist. The only people waiting outside were Bumpy's own men, watching the exit, ensuring Moretti left the neighborhood. The ripple effects were catastrophic for the syndicate. Moretti, convinced of Lansky's betrayal, went on a rampage. He didn't go to the cops, he went to the lower-level captains. He showed them the proof Bumpy had given him. Paranoia spread like a virus through the Genovese ranks. Lansky, confused and suddenly facing internal rebellion from his own enforcers who feared they were next on the cleanup list, had to react, to quell the rumors and protect himself from the very monster he had unleashed. Lansky had to put a contract out, not on Bumpy, but on Moretti and 3 of his associates who had seen the forged ledger. The price: $100,000. Lansky paid double the original bounty to kill his own best hitman. Bumpy Johnson sat in the Lenox Lounge until closing time. He finished his scotch. He tipped Etta $10, a week's wages. By the next morning, the word had spread from 110th to 155th Street. The Italians had blinked. This confrontation at the Lenox Lounge wasn't just a victory, it was a definition. It cemented Bumpy Johnson's status not as a thug, but as a grandmaster of street politics. He understood that in the world of organized crime, information was more lethal than ammunition. While other bosses relied on muscle, Bumpy relied on psychological warfare. This story reveals the core of the Bumpy Johnson legend. He was a man who read Shakespeare and philosophy, a man who could discuss the nuances of the Constitution while running a multi-million-dollar illegal lottery. He knew that violence was a failure of strategy. By turning Lansky's weapon against him, he proved that the most dangerous thing in Harlem wasn't a gun. It was Bumpy Johnson's mind. The lesson remains timeless. Real power isn't about the force you can exert. It's about the perception you can control. Bumpy didn't have to fire a shot to win a war. He just had to make his enemy pull the trigger on himself. If this story showed you why Bumpy was the smartest man to ever walk the streets of Harlem, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like if you respect the code, and tell me in the comments. If you were Moretti, would you have pulled the trigger or taken the envelope? Next week, we dive into the day Lucky Luciano tried to take Harlem and why he never came back.